Clay, at this point, which is the worst T'Pol storyline through 4 seasons of Star Trek Enterprise? Or 3 seasons, 3.1 seasons, however you want to look at it. Is it her drug addiction to fuel her emotional escapades with Trip? Or is it the 4th season continuation of the idea that she's still, after going back in time to Detroit, after Archer saves the day by knowing the future, after meeting Daniels, after talking to the sphere builders who are time-traveling agents themselves,
yes,
and then flying into World War II in an alternate history, still kind of not really believing in time travel on the, on the face of things. Mm-hmm. Which is the more embarrassing storyline for T'Pol, do you think?
I think at this point I'm going to go time travel because it's like, even in the X-Files, Scully eventually saw a UFO and she was like, okay, yeah, I understand now. They just keep showing T'Pol the UFO, and she just keeps blaming it on swamp gas,
denying its reality. I know. Yeah, it's. I think they almost kind of do it as a joke here. I think because she even gives up on it a little bit, but it's a dedication to character that Enterprise is continuing to have her not really believe in time travel, despite all evidence to the contrary.
Well, what I like about this show more than anything else is the consistency of the characters, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a sign of great writing to have your characters do exactly the same thing endlessly. All right, so this is Stormfront. We're going to be covering both parts of this one. It's a 2-parter, but we're going to be covering them both in one podcast episode. It's called Stormfront. Let's take a break. We'll play a clip from that episode, and then we'll come back and we'll break it down.
Rita Hayworth, Veronica Lake, Betty Grable. Americans are good at making movies. They're not so good at fighting. Someday, I will go to Hollywood, and I will meet Betty Grable. Maybe you will introduce me, huh? What do you think?
She's not your type.
Stormfront is 2 blurbs that I have to get through. It is the 1st and 2nd episodes of the 4th season of Star Trek Enterprise. It came out on October 8th, and a week later, whatever that was, the 15th or something of 2004. The first one is arc 1 of 2 in the Stormfront arc. It's 12 of 13 in the Temporal Cold War arc, and it is 26 of 28 in the Xindi Crisis. Written by Manny Coto, directed by Alan Croker, in-universe date not known, but it's the alternate history of 1944. In this episode, the first part, Archer and his crew find themselves in Earth's past with events of World War II altered by the Temporal Cold War. And then, in the second one, it is 2 of 2 in the Stormfront arc, 13 of 13 in the Temporal Cold War arc. Hooray! 27
Thank
of 28 in the Xindi Crisis arc. Where's 28 coming? Written by Manny Coto, directed by David Straighton. In-universe date unknown. It's alternate 1944 and 2154. In the second part, with the unlikely help of Silic, Archer closes in on the temporal operative whose actions have altered Earth's past and threatened to destroy all of time. Here we are with the 4th season of Star Trek Enterprise.
It is also the 11th studio album from Billy Joel, which few people realize is also about time-traveling Nazi aliens. That's
Stormfront Part 2.
Fire is about.
The full title of his magnum opus. Here we are in Season 4 of Enterprise. We have a new showrunner, Manny Coto. We have new production techniques. They're shooting on digital now. They're shooting on cameras that look like what I used when I was in college taking like TV and film production courses. It's funny how the tech has aged. And we have... Is there anything else new? No, we're just closing out the storyline that the 3rd season ended on, which is where we went to Nazi or America in 1944. We saw Nazis in San Francisco, and one of them had a clear case of alienitis on him. Cut to black. Here we are in part 2. Do you want to talk about the production? You seem surprised that it's digital. Being honest, I watched both of these on my phone last night, so I could not tell the difference.
As they were meant to be seen.
Martin Scorsese tweeted about it, the best way to watch things like this.
Somewhere David Lynch is giving you a standing ovation for your commitment to intentional screening media.
I put the iPad down. I said, no, we're doing this the real way, the way God intended. I watched it on my phone. It was very difficult to tell any difference on my phone. And before we started recording, I put on Netflix, and I watched it on Netflix. It's definitely it's definitely visible that this is now digital because it looks like a soap opera in a lot of scenes. But I didn't think it was awful to the point where it's like, wow, this looks really, really different. I thought it looked worse, but not appreciably so. Did you notice anything?
I actually didn't.
Yeah,
it didn't stand out to me. And now that you say that, I don't remember thinking it looked any different. Really, maybe I just wasn't paying attention to that. There was actually one scene, excuse me, Jesus, that I thought was particularly good looking, actually, which was the alleyway shootout confrontation scene where they run into the alien in the fedora in the trench coat, where they shoot the entire thing in silhouette. I actually thought that looked really nice. That was a nice kind of reveal and stuff for that. But, yeah, I guess I didn't really notice. The only thing I can say now that you say that is, aside from that scene, in my memory, it feels a little brighter than usual, but I don't know if that's
it's brighter.
Yeah.
I think it's... I would assume
Which
the
is funny,
brightness
actually.
is from shooting digital, that it has to be brighter at this point in its technology. It's not like film, where they could be a little bit more soft and things like that. I noticed it most on close-ups. In faces, it looks like they haven't photoshopped the like skin imperfections on people. You notice it in digital, and you don't really notice it in film as much as a softer image. But I didn't think it looked terrible. It does have a soap opera look. I'm sure you'll notice it on the next one once you start looking for it. It's one of those things. But
I'll have to look at maybe the last episode back to back, and so I can see if there's a difference that it stands out to me.
Yeah, that's just probably the last we'll talk about until we talk about it next episode when you go, oh, yeah, I did notice this at this point. But here, we're done with it.
And I'll say to you, did
thing.
you realize they've started to shoot on digital this season? And you'll say, no, I didn't realize that at all.
The episode order of Season 4 is cut way down. They're shooting on digital at this point. The Paramount or whatever is not giving out a lot of money for this season. It's kind of a surprise that they got Season 4 at this point, but they did. We have a new showrunner. We have a bunch of new writers. A bunch of writers from the previous seasons have disappeared. We have new group coming in and some returning people that we'll see as we move on. But that's enough of the boring stuff. What do you think of Stormfront Parts 1 and 2 as a whole?
It was fine.
The Cold War's over.
Yeah, man, I have never felt so happy. I actually got to feel it twice because when Daniel showed up, twisted and like he had just come out of the Brundlefly machine, and he seemed to die on the operating table there. I got very excited because I thought that meant that he was dead. But then he comes back at the end, only to, I assume, die again, or maybe just get sent back to the future. I don't know. But either way, he dissolved into a bright beam of light while we got to watch clips of the Clinton inauguration, I guess.
History rewriting itself in the background.
Yeah, I'm going to need some help with that because I didn't totally track how that ended up smoothing everything out.
I'm not going to talk about the time travel implications of this because I don't think I think that there is a way to go really deep on this to like explore what they're talking about in terms of timeline resetting and whether or not this would like logically make sense. Honestly, my takeaway from these episodes is that Kodo was ruthlessly efficient with fixing the ending of last season and closing the Cold War and just saying we're just done with this thing.
Yeah,
and
I knew it was coming, but it was nice to see like the Daniels part wasn't the part that told me the Cold War stuff was over. It was Silic getting shot to death.
Silic dying.
The Cold War was over. I was like, okay, this guy's fucking dead. We're done with this. Daniels, okay, he turns into little lights or whatever, and then I'm assuming that's the last we'll see of them.
Yes, this is the last appearance of Silic and Daniels in this series, so they're gone. The Cold War is over. It's not just a tease. It's also they even kind of hint at Silic. They're like, whenever they let the actor run around without makeup on, it's like it's the get out of jail free card for that day. It's like you're not going to be the Silic guy anymore, so just relax. I mean, the positives I have for this one are really just a sense of I'm glad they closed all of this stuff out. And
Yeah.
the Cold War stuff actually, like, I understand that they're working with what had come before them. I thought in some ways the Daniels that I saw here was actually just a little bit closer to the Daniels that I have in my mind's eye about what Daniel should actually be. When he's speaking to Archer on his deathbed, he's a little bit more vague about what's happening. It's still not perfect, I think, but he's just kind of generally talking in terms of like the timelines are compromised and like you have to do something about this. I can't do it because I went through the machine that mixed up my insides and made me old and young at the same part. And I thought that was okay. And I think that what they did was not get super specific with the Cold War stuff. They were just like, here's the general idea of what we know. These are the aliens who are trying to do it. Let's kill them, and we'll close the books on all of this story. And I think, again, the weakness of it is that I kind of like the Nazi aliens in this for like how little you actually get to interact with them. But at the same time, because this is the first time you've ever seen them, there's very little that you can work with here, besides the fact of what I think the episode does is basically makes them time travel Nazis. Like they speak with German accents, and they have an ethos that is basically a ramped up version of what the Nazis were after, which is this kind of domination, not of just the globe. I think one of them has a line like, we're not after just planets, we're after like time and the universe itself. And so like, okay, they're just bigger Nazis, so I'm not going to feel bad when they die, and I don't have to think about this all too much. But that was it, I think, for the time Cold War stuff.
Yeah, as it was kind of wrapping up, I'll admit that my attention was not entirely held by what was going on. And so I don't know if I missed something, but when they blew up that gun on top of the building, the big Nazi laser gun, that immediately reset the timeline in a way that I couldn't track, because my understanding of what was going on was they were there trying to build a machine to send them back to the future, but if they got back to the future, then they would start the temporal Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
So destroying that machine, it's like a paradox on top of a paradox, I guess, because destroying the machine means they can't go back to the future, which means they could never come back from the future to ruin the timeline. Is that why everything resets?
Yeah, I guess the question would be, because of what happens, does all of the stuff that is regarding the Cold War that happened the past 3 seasons, does that no longer exist in the timeline? Because the Cold War never starts at that point.
I'm more concerned about Brooklyn. It's because rules of time travel seem to imply that what has already happened has still happened. So I don't know why I don't know, whatever. My eyes have gone cross-eyed. It doesn't matter. It's over.
I don't think it super matters, really. Like it's a weird episode because if it wasn't so obvious, and if I hadn't just read that this is 12 and 13 out of the Cold War arc, which is 13 episodes, you'd probably have a bigger place to complain about this one, right? You'd be like, well, what the hell is going on with the Temporal Cold War? Like, how are there going to be more episodes based off of this? I watched this one, as I said, on my phone, and it did feel to me, even right from the outset, I had a kind of energy. I was like, I just got to get through these 2 episodes of Stormfront. Like, I just have to watch these things to see what's happening. And it's not even, and I think you're allowed that because I knew going in that the Cold War is over after this. So that's kind of in the back of my mind. But it's also, just, it feels like the writers are saying it. Archer at the end says, basically what I think the entire writing staff and everyone watching is thinking, he says, we're done with you and your damn temporal Cold War. And then he just beams out of there or whatever. And it's like, yeah, we're done with it. It took whatever messy steps it needed to get there. It took, and it kind of wiped off the plate. You're free to talk about the Cold War if you want, but I think that there's a larger aspect that's not so in the details about the temporal Cold War that I think this episode best exists in a sense, but it's up to you. Yeah,
the only other thing that I was going to say about it is that it reminded me of I couldn't help thinking about that fairly recent Rick and Morty episode where they start doing time travel, where the snakes keep jumping back through time and creating paradox on top of paradox on top of paradox. Where it's like the Temporal Cold War is like a cool idea and it sounds cool, but I think you kind of see from this that implementation of that, unless you've got a good idea on how to do it, it just turns into mush. And so at the end here, we ended up with a mush of Temporal Cold War that never really got off the ground. Was never, it never really got interesting. Like they kept dropping beats that were supposed to be like, oh, okay, now things are getting going. But even those beats were kind of like lackluster. It never really amounted to anything, and then here it never really amounts to anything. But it's over. But what was the positive that you were going to say?
The positive of the Cold War is that, to what you're saying, this is the first episode where they're forced to explain what's going on, and they have no time to explain what's going on. So, like the introduction of whatever these aliens are called, but Vosk is their leader, the gray-skinned aliens with the red eyes. In a Star Trek sense, I don't mind this setup that they've done. Like, I think it's kind of ridiculous that they went back to World War II. But I like this idea of the time-traveling aliens who are going to cause the problem being stuck in the past, and they can't do what they need to do quickly because Earth's 1944 technology is not good enough for them to build the weapon that they need to get back. I thought that was kind of a... what I think this episode succeeds at is it does as good as it can with the garbage in that it was getting, and it kind of sorts it in a way that you go like, okay, whatever. I'm not gonna think about this episode whatsoever, but they did a decent job of keeping the production line going and closing it off at the very end of it. And so it's like, while I didn't enjoy this episode, I almost appreciate it on a writing level of good job just to get this done in a way that moderately held my attention the entire time, you know?
Yeah, I would agree. I do think, while I think they fall back on some fairly cliche stuff, like going back in time and being rescued by Alfred Woodard from First Contact, basically. Yeah, like they basically just lifted that whole thing from First Contact and added a little bit of First Contact and a little bit of City on the Edge of Forever, and you got the character from this.
And the ending shot is Voyager. When the ship arriving home, that's the Voyager ending.
Yeah. But yeah, I do think they kind of did make lemonade out of this to a certain extent. And I agree with what you're saying, where it's not. They definitely were kind of painted into a corner as to how to handle this stuff, and the way they chose to do it is not bad. I think you're right. I think the aliens are fairly interesting, even though they're kind of limited by their cliche what if the Nazis actually won the war kind of stuff. Yeah, I didn't think it was awful. I feel like for the material that they had to work with, I thought it was fine. It falls back on some of the hallmarks of the show, which is in the last 20 minutes we just start shooting people, but it actually kind of works in this one because it's more of the era, I guess, to have that be in your finale. It did have some of the most needless exposition I've ever heard in a TV show, where the girl and the two roustabout guys and Archer are about to go into somewhere to rough somebody up, and before they can go in there, they have to stop to make sure everybody knows that these guys used to be loan sharks. And it's like, just looking and listening to these guys tells you these guys are loan shark characters from a mob movie. You don't need to explain it. It's pretty clear.
I've seen one of them in the best mob television show ever created. I know
was that a Sopranos guy? I thought it was
Bobby. Yeah, it's Bobby Bacala, Tony Sciarpa or whatever, the big guy, the heavyset guy. I always wonder about things like that. I know actors are actors and they have to work, and their pay depends on working. But it's very funny to me when you see Bobby Bacala, who's a well-known face from Sopranos, one of the greatest television shows ever produced, is a secondary, not even tertiary role in a Star Trek Enterprise episode. It's about World War II Nazis.
And even there, he's getting typecast.
Yes, He's got the.
You're going to be on Star Trek. Oh, that's great. I can't wait to put on the makeup. Oh, no, you're not going to do any of that. You're just going to wear a fedora, and you're just going to talk like the way you do now and point a gun at people. Oh, I see.
I like to imagine him. He's got like a thick British aristocratic accent.
Yes.
And the Italian accent is just a ruse. He's like, why have I been typecast again?
I, sir, was in Royal Shakespeare.
You're just so damn good at playing a fat Italian guy.
They never do this to Sir Patrick.
You were talking about the there's a couple points I wanted to go here. I think what undoes this one and makes it barely watchable is that it does feel, in its attempt to wrap everything up, it's an extremely cliche Star Trek episode. It's like we talked about all the homages or like sort of riffs on things. It's like the First Contact thing, the ending, which is just Voyager done again. To me, it felt a lot like Past Tense, which is that two-parter in DS9 where they go back in time to the poor, the bad parts of the USA, and Cisco becomes that Bell, Gabriel Bell, or whatever that guy's name was. Mm-hmm. I didn't think that episode was very good, and this felt a lot of the same. And I think what they're trying to say is that, like, when the Nazis invaded, everybody started working together. Like, the loan sharks took up the cause, and, like, they're working with black women and black men, and there's the racial and socioeconomical divisions that existed in the time have just disappeared because everyone's working together against the Nazis, which is fine. The show doesn't really hammer on it, but it felt pretty cliche.
Yeah, I was actually surprised how much the Nazis laid in on the racial stuff. There was some dialogue in that from when Archer was walking with the woman. The Nazis were saying some stuff to her where I was like, wow, I can't believe they did this on syndicated TV on a Star Trek show. This is pretty rough.
A little bit out of the point of the episode too, which was which was the reason it was surprising to me. It was like, if they hadn't said anything, I would have been like, yeah, that's typical normal Star Trek. They're just going to ignore that kind of stuff. But all I can think about is that, in this age of horrible headlines that are designed to get you to click and be outraged about something, it's just like, why does the Star Trek franchise insist on having white males explain to black females about how the future is going to be? They do it. I don't think it's not. I mean, 2 times is not a
pattern,
MO or any habit or anything like that. But I just don't. It was so redundant of the First Contact storyline. I found it somewhat distracting, and I was just thinking about the First Contact storyline. And that character is fine. I think that Alfre Woodard in First Contact is more memorable than this character who's in this one, this woman who's in this story. But I think generally all of the tertiary characters in this suffer from not being memorable whatsoever. And the only reason I know that one is named Sal is because they say his name 5,000 times, and I have to remember it.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. And this is actually kind of a better version of Carpenter Street, down to the fact that it's the same thing where they're trying to build a germ warfare weapon to destroy the Earth. In order some kind of machine is going to destroy the timeline as we know it. Yeah. No, it's literally a plague. They mention it in the first episode where they're talking to the German guy and they're like, "What if we could build you a plague weapon that would wipe everybody out that you wanted to wipe out?" And I was like, "This is exactly what fucking Carpenter Street was."
Sure.
And
were they being truthful about that? I guess that kind of washed. Yeah. Okay. All right. I guess it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, but because it never comes up again. I mean, it was just no. Oh, he just says it in passing, but it still has the same kind of through line. And I say it's a better one because I think the change that they make is for the better, which is the aliens are trying to do bad stuff, but they're hampered by 1940s technology.
Yeah.
So like if the Xindi guys were trying to build a futuristic germ warfare weapon out of the inner workings of a Chrysler or something, it would have been probably a little bit more interesting, a little bit more like weird kind of steampunk or something. But
what did you think of? Because I I don't know. I liked these aliens, actually. I like I like their sort of energy. I love their look. I think they're actually kind of scary looking. And I think that you didn't like them. I
don't know. They are. The makeup is great. Like, the makeup looks fantastic, but their design feels a little too mid 2000s-y. Like, it feels like it feels like a fairly stock sort of look for a humanoid monster that they were doing around that time.
Sure. I think they look, for Star Trek, fairly demonic.
Sure, yeah. I was going to say it wouldn't look out of place on Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, and I guess maybe I consider that somewhat unique for Star Trek, because I don't think Star Trek usually ever goes demonic with it, and I think it's just building off of the Nazi imagery, and the red of the swastika flags matches the red of their eyes and things like that. So I was okay with it. I think the strongest sequence is at the end of the second episode, where they do the thing, instead of hopping through the time portal immediately, the guy gives a speech about how they're going to like dominate the time universe and stuff like that. I actually thought that if they had been more prominent in the Temporal Cold War story, they're kind of a villain with something going on a little bit. Like, they have at least a reason to be doing something. And I like that. I mean,
that's what's missing. That's what's missing from the Temporal Cold War thing is really it's such a weird overarching plot line to do over 3 seasons, because they're so excuse me, they don't give you anything up front, so it's all super vague, so you don't know why anything is happening. It's just that these kind of people are mad at each other. And then when they finally do give you stuff at the end of season 3, it's all insanity, and you're wondering why Daniels can't step in the way that these other guys are stepping in, and is this separate from the Cold War? Is this part of it? And then in this one, they actually give you some sort of an antagonist for this Temporal Cold War that would have been nice to have if you wanted to craft, a workable story out of it instead of what they ended up doing.
What'd you think of the villain's offer to Archer, where he offers to send him home in exchange for letting their plan go to fruition, with the promise that he'll correct things once he gets to the other timeline?
Yeah, it showed me that Archer has a better handle on time travel than a lot of the time travel people do. Not that this guy didn't, because clearly he was just, giving him the devil's bargain kind of thing, and he knows exactly what was going to happen. But Archer is like, no, this isn't my first temporal rodeo here, pal. If you send me back to the future, my future doesn't exist because of what you're doing here. And the guy's like, oh, you've been here before. So it's nice to see Archer actually retain some of that temporal knowledge, more so than even Daniels had, apparently, based on the last couple episodes we watched.
Yeah, Archer's about to whip out his flow chart about how things are how Primer works in time travel history.
He walks over and he flips over the chalkboard like Doc Brown, and he puts the line, and it's like, we skew into this separate timeline.
It's that Christopher Nolan YouTube video where he explains the plot of Memento, how time works in Memento. He's got the chalkboard in the circle, and he's like, we're right here, and I'm going to go over here. It's actually a good video. I'm making fun of him, but it is pretty good. I maybe tell me if I'm crazy or not. I thought that bargain scene was actually somewhat unique for Enterprise, because I don't think I've ever seen antagonists on Enterprise try to bargain with our heroes in that kind of a way. The problem with it was that his offer was clearly ridiculous, and that there's no reason that Archer would ever actually buy into this. That is what undoes it. But I like the scene, at least, of having the alien. It felt like there was kind of a nuance to these aliens that I haven't felt in other antagonists, especially like the Xindi and stuff like that, where that alien knows that he's kind of fucked with this technology from 1944. So in order to try to get the thing done, he's going to let Archer go back to the future. And he's kind of just like throwing this against the wall to see what sticks, but I appreciate it because he should be that kind of desperate at that point in his alien plot for what he's doing. So I just thought it was, I don't think these aliens are top 10 antagonists of Star Trek or anything, but I did feel that they at least felt like something was going on in Enterprise particularly, even though it's not really all that much. I appreciated the attempt.
Yeah, what's actually too bad is I feel like he makes him the wrong deal. Because, like you're saying, it's a ridiculous deal, and Archer's very quick to shoot it down and be like, no, I know how this works. That isn't going to, you're just going to screw me over. You're just going to, you're what's the fable of going across the river and then the alligator eats the chicken?
Oh, Scorpion and the Frog? Is that
yeah, there you go. Sure. Where the scorpion eats the chicken, yes.
Yeah, with the bag of rice.
Because, you're looking for... You're stuck with this time travel plot where you send Archer back into the past, or you send them all back into the past, into this timeline destroying whatever. And you got to get out of it, but you also kind of want to make something out of it too. So instead of having the villain say, we can send you back to the future, no problem, and we'll make sure everything is fixed for you. I'm surprised that he didn't say to Archer, if you work with me, you can make the future happen the way you want it to, which would mean that the Xindi never attack Earth, 7 million people don't die. He never gets that sort of power play, which I think is what sending him back into the past would do. Because honestly, I mean, like we've talked about this before. What time travel stories generally are is usually coming to terms with the fact that you can't change the past, or if you're presented with the possibility of changing the future, how you react to that. There's usually a little bit more meat on the bone if you're sending somebody back in time or forward in time or whatever. And this doesn't really have that, and I think that would have been the place to do it, where instead of it just being like, oh, yay, the timeline is secured and the Nazis never won, because if the Nazis won, that would be bad, you use the time travel device or mechanic to give your main character a real ethical problem, where he's given the opportunity to have this power to change everything and save everybody who didn't die or whatever, or who died in the past season or whatever. But it's too bad they don't do that.
Is that a Faustian bargain? What's a Faustian bargain? Is that the good version of that story?
Faustian, Faustian bargain is like a sell your soul to the devil type situation.
A pact whereby a person trades something of supreme moral or spiritual importance, such as the soul, for some world material benefit. Okay. Is it kind of
like
maybe
Johnson.
A reverse Faustian bargain? Yeah. Because I 100% agree with you.
Don't try to pull the reverse Faustian on me, alien. I've been to time travel. I know how it works.
He's looking it up on Wikipedia too. Because I agree with you. I think that what's lacking from that scene is that there's actually some sort of decision that Archer has to make.
Right.
Right. I like the concept of that scene and the aliens signing a promise something and Archer not being able to do it or not wanting to do it. But the way that it's constructed is not effective enough for Archer to even consider it for a moment, because it's the guy with the gun saying, "Trust me." Like, you step through the door first, and you go, "Well, I don't know about that."
It's kind of the scene that I'm kind of pitching here is sort of I think what they were trying to do with the Daniel stuff in the last season 3 episodes, except that it didn't make any sense. The offer that the situation they put Archer in didn't make any sense, because as we pointed out multiple times, Archer can see that if he does what he does, the future will be fine. So there is no choice to be made. It's like a false choice, and it doesn't have any narrative weight. And I think this would have been a nice place to kind of make something out of the temporal war, even if that's the only moment you get out of it. Maybe it makes it a little more worth it.
Yeah, it's a good point. I on a technical level, I don't even know if this really matters anymore. I think that the problem with that, even if you got there, is that Daniels and the Temporal Cold War is so jumbled at that point that I wonder if you'd get to that end. I feel in that situation you could easily arrive there if Daniels was more clear cut. I guess what my concern is, and I can't really pinpoint why this would be a problem, is that Daniels is so up and down and back and forth on what he thinks he's allowed to do that when that bargain came in, it feels that Daniel should be the counterpoint to the alien explaining to Archer why he can't do that. And I don't know if Daniels has any ground to be complaining about anything at that point.
No.
Yeah.
Honestly, the only other... I would like to see one more Temporal Cold War episode where Daniel shows up to talk to Archer, and then, like, Daniels' supervisor comes in, and he's like, Daniels, you're just a janitor. What are you doing messing with the timeline? You're not supposed to be doing this. He's like, sorry, boss. You're really bad at this.
Take off that ribbed condom outfit, Daniels, and get back here to clean these things up.
Are you wearing my temporal suit, Daniels? You're supposed to be dry cleaning it, not wearing it.
I hate Daniels. I thought Daniels was a C- here, which is maybe the best that Daniels has ever been. I do think it's ridiculous when he stumbles in and he's half aged and he falls into flocks or whatever. I was like, this is absurd that this is where he ends up. But I didn't mind him talking to Archer. I thought when he's young again at the end or back to his normal shape, they didn't linger on it too long. There was no horribly embarrassing scene where they shake hands and Archer's like, well, it's been a hell of a time knowing you, Daniels, and then they like kiss or whatever, and then they leave. Archer is pretty much at the end going, fuck yourself. If I ever see you again, it's going to be too soon. And I liked that. I thought that was a good way to end a terrible character on this series.
Yeah. They should have given him a cheesy parting line where he was like, well, maybe next time, Archer.
You'll always make time for the temporal agents, Archer.
Isn't that how Next Generation ends? Does Q may have a line like that at the end of the trial?
He says, he just says you'll find out. It's not.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it's not a pun. I don't think it's a pun if he says something like that. But
he should have said, "Well, it's time for me to go," or is it when for me to go, and then just walk away.
My favorite spice when cooking is thyme, Jonathan. Do you enjoy seasoning your food with thyme as well? I think that the last final, before we move on to something else for the Cold War, I think that the epitome of the Cold War, I think, in these episodes is when Silik shows up. And Silik has
I was very confused about what he was trying to do.
I don't know what Silik is doing. I don't know whose side Silik is on. I don't know why he showed up. I don't know why he has to die, except for the fact that he can't be around anymore. I don't know if he's still working for the invisible, shadowy figure.
Yeah, they kind of explain it a bit, and when he's talking to Archer, and he's like, yeah, we don't like the temporal guys, but they actually saved our lives, but we still want to kill them. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, sure.
No, that's exactly what it is. I think it ties back into whatever the episode that was where Silik attempts to blow up the Enterprise or whatever, and he doesn't, and we're confused about whether or not this is supposed to be the plan. If it's not the plan, why did he do that in the first place? Mm-hmm. The Silik and the Suliban are terrible as well, I think, but they were shoved into that Cold War stuff, and none of their motivation ever was grounded in anything. It was just what they needed them to do as villains, and here it's Silik just admitting to that as much. It's like, yeah, well, we sometimes fight with them, but I want to save Daniels' life this time because that's great. Let me take off my makeup. I'll run around with you. The shadowy guy sent me back to fix this, but I can't have these gray-skinned guys doing stuff either. And it's like, all right, well, you know, forward on the DVR. Just keep moving.
When he showed up and he confronts Trip and he's like, get into the shuttlecraft. I don't want to have to shoot you. I'm like, okay, I guess he needs Trip for something. And then he shoots Trip, drags him out of the room apparently, and then just jumps into the shuttlecraft and drives off. I was like, oh, okay, so he didn't need Trip, but he was going to take him with him? Okay, sure.
Yeah,
so then they go down. They go down to the place, and then Trip gets captured, blah, 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 blah. And then eventually Silik ends up back on the Enterprise with like nothing to show for it, and he didn't really did he do anything while he was there except for figure out how to weasel into the compound? That seemed to be the only thing he did, right? Unless I missed something.
I don't know. This is my weakness of this is that, as you were saying, I found it hard to pay 100% attention or to care about, like, it's not an episode that I sat there thinking, what is Silic doing? Why is he doing anything?
Yeah.
It seemed plainly obvious that Silic has to go where Silic has to go in order for these things to happen. Silic has to get back to the Enterprise so he can put his sweet leather bomber jacket on and go down with Archer and do whatever he needs to do. I don't know why. I don't know why he got into the shuttle where he was planning to go. They shot the shuttle down. He ended up on Earth. He got back somehow. He's explaining to Archer.
I didn't know they could shapeshift. Has that always been something they could do?
That's
turn into
always
other
been the
people?
thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I probably would have done if I had to wrap all this stuff up? I would have had. I know this is kind of convoluted and whatnot, but you work with what you get, I guess. I would have revealed that the blue-faced guys were Suliban. It was Silic. It was Silic in the sky as a different alien or something. So Archer wouldn't recognize.
Sorry, who are the
him or some
blue-faced
shit like
guys?
that. The red-eye guys,
the Nazi,
demon,
Nazi,
yeah,
aliens,
the Nazi guys, the Nazi aliens. Or have so at least you're keeping it in house when you're doing this stuff instead of bringing in a new species that's only there for this thing. Then you can pay off the Suliban as these bad guys that are doing whatever, and I don't know.
It's true. I mean, the problem there is I would have then looked back at all the previous Suliban appearances, gone, does this make sense? Like what they're doing here at the end? Is this what they've been trying to do the entire time? I know that's the problem with that's the problem with talking about this episode, right? Is our podcast could be who cares? Like it's over. It doesn't really matter. So it's difficult to break down. It's difficult to track and try to pay attention to. Did you hate this episode?
No, I didn't hate it. I thought the stuff with the woman, I just can't remember the character's name.
I can't remember their names either.
She was good. I'm always impressed that they find, anytime a show or whatever does this kind of stuff, they always find one or two little details that I think are really nice that work well. Like the Billie Holiday thing, I thought was kind of nice, a nice detail to throw in there of occupied Brooklyn or whatever. I thought she was pretty good. Sure, you've got her and two gabagool gangster guys fighting off an entire platoon of Nazi guys, whatever, at the end.
With a pistol.
Where they drive up in like 15 Nazis in like a narrow straightaway. There's no way to hide. Open fire on this car. And then the Sopranos guy just like jaunts out of the car and they're just shooting at him. Nothing's coming near him. And then he throws a grenade and kills like 5 of them.
Yeah.
But, that's the trappings of the show, I guess.
It's an interesting mix of that stuff because I wouldn't say I love what Archer does in the Nazi in the U.S. and stuff like that. I think that the characters there are pretty much fine. I think that it generally does what it needs to do. The gangsters or whatever. It kind of hints at a semi-federation thing of the groups, all different groups working together, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's the intent, but that's kind of like what an implication would be from it. I found myself intrigued by little details here that the show doesn't have time to get into. One is that the show goes out of its way to explain how... Well, I was watching it going... The Nazis made it to the east coast of the U.S. It's like, how are they holding all of this territory
I was thinking
at this
the same
point?
Thing,
And then the show goes out of its way. I was thinking, I don't know this. Like in actual historical context, what was Nazi Germany's plan? Like they can't go too far because you can't control all that area. But
there's not
in
exactly,
the show they make it.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's not exactly the same sort of like, at least as far as I know, island system in the Atlantic Ocean that allows you to say attack from Japan.
Yeah, the Pacific,
or attack
Pacific
Japan.
Theater or whatever. Yeah,
yeah. That's the thing I was thinking. I was just gonna say, I was doing that math in my head where I was like, could the Nazis have even effectively attacked the East Coast? That's a long way to go. And like the East Coast, I mean, I was thinking, well, could they? I mean, they would. The defense would obviously be solid, but the East Coast is obviously huge. But you're not. The East Coast is huge, so you're not going to attack all of it at the same time. Yeah, what are the chances that you could actually, the Nazis could have invaded and taken over like a third of the United States, and I feel like it's probably
basically
not very
everything
high.
before the Mississippi purchase. Like the
I mean, I guess
sorry, that was what
I guess
America
we're not.
was.
I guess we're not considering laser guns that they might have had in order to do it, like the
No, the show goes out
weaponry.
of its way to explain how this was possible, which I applaud.
Oh, that's right,
But
yeah.
the alien plot was so complicated that what they did was assassinate Lenin so that communism
Yes,
never
that's
took
right.
over the Soviet Union, and therefore
So we could
Nazi
focus-
Germany
yeah,
didn't
that's right.
see the communists as a threat, so they could focus on their western front, basically, which would be our East Coast. I was like, there's a lot of thought going into explaining how the Nazis could get to the Washington D.C. It was interesting.
Yeah, I still don't know if they make it. Honestly, that's a long way to go.
No, it would be
on-
it would be extremely difficult. I would have to assume the
without
laser guns played
aircraft
more
carriers
of a
or
thing
something.
than-
Yeah.
But they killed Lenin. That was the alien plot. They killed reads of reviewing the history. It's like Lenin was assassinated. So what the hell happened there?
Yeah,
It was
interesting
clever.
choice. Yeah.
Yeah, very. It's a plan with a lot of things could go wrong. You'd think you'd rather just arm the Nazis with plasma guns and have them shoot everybody with it, and that would be an effective
Well,
enough. Example.
actually, if we want to get nerdy about this, killing Lenin actually might have. Do you remember what year they said they killed Lenin?
No, I think it was right after his rise to power, so it would have been like the 1910s, something like that, 1920s.
Okay,
the latest.
Yeah, because Lenin was sent to Russia by the Germans in World War One in order to basically cause the Bolshevik Revolution. I believe it's the Bolshevik Revolution.
Yeah.
And take Russia's focus away from World War One, so Germany, exactly like they're saying in the show, wouldn't have to focus on Russia. But if you assassinate Lenin, then Russia can focus on Germany in World War One, and Germany probably loses even worse in World War One. So arguably, World War II might not happen the same way.
Yeah, it puts a lot of emphasis on the fact that the Nazis didn't like communism. They're like, that's
Yeah,
enough. That'll stop them from attacking them. If they could probably attack them, but as long as they're not totally ideologically opposed to whatever systems they each have. It was just a strange.
It is
beat.
very interesting. Yeah.
I would have actually enjoyed. I was thinking maybe Star Trek should do more weird, bizarre, like deep dive historical time alters like that. It's like, this is kind of an interesting idea, actually. I think it's absurd, but it's like, I like complicating the what if of history more than just what if the Nazis won. If it's more of like a strange version of how that came about. And I don't know.
Yeah, you know what show actually does that really well is Legends of Tomorrow, the DC show on the CW. It started out, the first season was pretty garbage, but the second season is really, really fun, and it's a lot of that, where it's basically they're on this time ship, and they keep getting these alerts that something in the timeline has been messed with, and so then they have to go to that point in time, and you see how everything is different, and they have to fix everything. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, there's
Good concept.
There's ample room to romp around in there. Stormfront's not interested in the romping aspect. Anything else about the Nazi stuff? I liked the edited montage, the war propaganda stuff that opens the second episode with the black and white footage of Hitler in DC and stuff like that. That was neat. Again, horrible use of the new opening theme music right after the Nazis have invaded
and the
America.
Holocaust
It's been a long
never
time.
ended. It's been a long road. Yeah.
Anything else
the
about
only
the
other thing
Nazis?
the only other thing that stood out to me is that I appreciated, or I was impressed, that Trip had absolutely no qualms about recklessly killing Nazis at the first chance that he got by setting the bombs.
Yeah,
into
I was thinking that
shuttlecraft and just killed like 15 guys indiscriminately.
it's the video game rule. If you're killing people, they have to be Nazis. It's like an acceptable thing. You know, it's like as long as it's a Nazi, you can just shoot them because they blow them up at the end. Any other person, there would be serious consideration on Archer's part about whether or not they have the right to time travel back in time and blow up Brooklyn and stuff like that. But if it's Nazis, fuck them. I don't disagree, but it's a decision.
It really goes a long way to show you, not in this, I just mean in general, that general rule, to show you how awful those people they were as like an ethos.
Those people.
Yeah. Well, no, how awful the Nazis were is because even now, almost 100 years later, maybe less than that, but you know what I'm talking about. It's still like, no, that's, you can shoot them in anything. You need a bad guy, you put a Nazi in it, it's fine. You blow him up, doesn't matter. Not really a person. Not really a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the danger of this, which was started last season and isn't the fault of these episodes, but they are just they have kind of become just a generic evil to the point where they've lost any meaning to them beyond just being generic evil.
Sure.
You know, it's like
sure.
Nazism isn't focused on in this episode. It's just a symbol of what Nazis are.
Yeah.
That I would argue, like the amplification of the aliens, the Nazi aliens, is the only reference to Nazism that you have. Kind of like their belief in themselves as like the ultimate state that should be controlling everything.
Right.
But no, they're used to short. And again, it's not this episode's fault because Berman and Braga decided to end the last season with the Nazis, so you kind of have to have Nazis in this opening thing. But it does add to the laziness feeling of it, where I think even in other series when they had Nazis and stuff, it wasn't literal Nazis. It was alien cultures that acted that way, that had a kind of like fascist outlook or the same kind of propaganda and stuff like that. So,
or
I don't know.
You know, even if you look at City on the Edge of Forever, the Nazis play a big role in that, but not directly. It's they're taking a small sliver of, if you drop this pebble here instead of over here, then the Nazis win. Which is a more it's a more elegant way to use them in your story without just jackbooting all over the place and whatnot.
Yeah. I thought the worst shot was there's a exterior establishing shot of the White House with Nazi flags draped in front of it. It's like, I don't care for this. This is like just it seemed too much. Although we'll close with this thought and then we'll go to the patron thoughts and everything. Well, I think what I like about your City on the Edge of Forever reference is that the Nazis there were on the periphery, but they provided the flavor and the context for Kirk's sacrifice and what Kirk decides to do in a very personal story there. Here, I thought the opposite was actually the case, where the personal, like, the camera literally is in rooms in Brooklyn, and it's hard to get this all-encompassing understanding of what the Nazis have done in this timeline. It felt to me a little bit backwards. Like, it wasn't an appropriate way to show the scale, or it wasn't an appropriate way to use the Nazis, because it felt like they were trying to explain this gigantic change in Nazi world history, but at the same time they couldn't really show you that because everything is so stuck in these small scenes with the characters.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was kind of the opposite of City on the Edge, which I think City on the Edge is actually kind of a brilliant episode, and this one's just like after the Star Trek episode,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, they use them for shorthand. They use them the same way you use them in Indiana Jones, although not as well, obviously. Yeah.
Yep. Let's go to
why couldn't they have picked a more interesting timeline? Like, if you're gonna firebomb your own show, I mean, maybe that was part of it. If you're gonna firebomb your own show by throwing everybody back into the past, do something different instead of Nazis. Pick I don't know. I got nothing.
The Depression during Jimmy Carter. Gas prices are $12 a gallon. Lines are out the door. Archer has to gas up the ship, and he can't afford it because the gas prices have caused everything to fall apart.
Do it. You get Trip running cocaine in from Colombia or something. I did really appreciate that. There was a certain, I can't remember which episode it happens in, but I think it's Archer, where he literally says what we said at the end of the last episode, where he says, I wasn't expecting to get into another situation. After everything that happened last season, he's like, I was on my way home. I wasn't expecting to get into another situation. It was like you and me both, John.
That's That's the writers coming through, I think, because T'Pol and Trip have the same conversation where Trip is like, I was going to be on a beach in Aruba. That's like,
yeah, or maybe that's him. Yeah, maybe it's Trip that says it. I can't remember who says it.
It's Trip and T'Pol. T'Pol wanted to go home, and Trip wanted to go on the beaches.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of writers, the voice of the writer room, I think, coming through in those scenes. So let's take a break. We'll play another clip from this episode, Stormfront, these episodes, and then we will read some patron thoughts, give our final thoughts about Stormfront, Part 1 and 2.
The timeline's resetting itself. You did it. Bosk is dead. He didn't make it back. All of the damage he caused, it never happened.
And you're here to give me a pat on the back.
In a way.
Well, I don't want it. I want you to leave me and my crew alone. We're done with you and your damn Temporal Cold War.
It's coming to an end because of what you did. You have no idea how many lives you've saved.
I'll take your word for it.
Thank you very much for listening to the show. Today we're done with Stormfronts Part 1 and 2. Enterprise's 4th season is off with a bang. You can support the show at patreon.com/The Pensky File. If you enjoyed all these content today, there's multiple contents, you can go to the Patreon. Support us there. A couple dollars a month, you get extra stuff, extra podcasts. You get the ability to control what we talk about in the future episodes. You get access to the Captain's Ready Room on Discord if you're high enough level. That way you get early access to all the shows. They usually come out 2 days early, so that's if that's your thing, Patreon's the best way to do that. And as always, we give a special thank you to our Captain Tier supporters, who include Tark Latif, Samuel Custer, Joint Mango, Kyle Barrett, Mike Burnett, Andrew Cherlog, Matt Ross, Michael Pond, Christian Pouch, Matt Cutler, Nick Sergey, Grim Santos, Sean Bradley, Killens, Cardinal Doomsday, Dwayne Hackett, Vault 13 Hero, Kevin Reyes, Jordan Cooper, Russell Oge, Stephen Minton, HH28, Darth Moss, Derek Zajac, Paul Roscoe, Jacob123, Poindexter G, Patrick Seba, Dave Davies, Johnny Franceschi, Mike Harris, Captain Brazen, Eric Antoine, Jakey's Gamer, Kevin Lowry, Corey Martin, William Scheisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Nick the Rat, Disbrada, Ed Mark Starr, Soylent Blue, Zane Majors, Olivier Pardeur, Gruppler, John Zorn, Retail, Tom Hickey, Jose Hunter, ZWNF Remixes, Captain McMunchausen, James McLennan, Beal, Jonas, Tommy Tango, Tuvix Must Die, Dennis Seifert, Chris McLaughlin, and Mutilated Puppet. Thank you very much, everybody, for supporting the show. We're now well on our way to Voyager.
Did we lose Lokai?
Maybe the card didn't charge. That could be a possibility. Oh, we might have lost him to a credit card decline. So, Beal, alert your enemy that has happened. Well, maybe we'll see him next time, unless he was upset with our coverage of Enterprise Season 3. He or she, whoever that is. Thanks very much, everybody, for supporting the show. It's nice when the names actually remind you of, like, if not generic name, but if random person with a real name fell off, I might not notice it at this point because the list is so long, which is sad and terrific at the same time. All right, let's go to patron thoughts about this one, and then we'll wrap it up. Kyle Barrett says, Stormfront, I fucking hate these episodes. Despite its clean, textureless digital appearance that makes it look like a daytime soap opera, Season 4 is largely fantastic, but it's bookended by the worst episodes of the series. I don't blame Kodo for this episode. He's doing his best wrangling the weird pieces he's been gifted and trying to make some sense out of them, but straight after the Xindi arc, it all feels repetitive. At its best, this two-parter feels like a subpar episode of Doctor Who, but it feels to be fun, and it seems like Kodo has just decided to intentionally sacrifice these two episodes to eliminate the lingering Temporal Cold War arc and begin the season proper next episode. I might hate Stormfront less if it was in the middle of the season, but, like Trip, I just want them to get home already, and this is a worthless diversion that even sweet Bobby Bacala can't save. 1 out of 5. Next comment is Royo.
I forgot that guy's name was Bobby Bacala, and I was like, that's a really interesting nickname he has for Scott Bakula.
It's very close. They should have had Archer on Sopranos.
Quantum Leap, that
Royo
show starring sweet Bobby Bacula.
Royo says, if a 4 out of 5 is a recommendation to a non-Trekkie to watch the episode, I give this two-parter a flat 0 because it makes me embarrassed to be a fan of Star Trek. Literal Nazis with death rays and Nazi flags draped over the White House, and Enterprise tries to play it all straight. Legitimately, they'd have been better off hamming it up with camp and shooting the episode in black and whites if they were really going to do Nazis with death rays in 44. Command and Conquer's Red Alert 2 from 2000 understood the need to not be overly serious by having Soviet General Vladimir polishing his boots with an American flag in the Oval Office of the White House, melding dark historical humor with acting cheese. They even brought back J. Paul Boehmer to reprise his role as a Nazi from Voyager's Killing Game. Unfortunately, his holodeck Nazi character had far more of a point in Voyager, despite not even being real or even having a name. 0 out of 5.
Ouch.
Rayhan Jaffer says, a strong start to the final season of Enterprise with this detour in Archer's family history as Daniels transports him back in time to protect his ancestor Jean-Francois Archer from the Suliban. Remember them in early 18th century France. Interesting piece of trivia. The surprisingly graphic 2-minute-long scene of Phlox slaughtering a pheasant was cut to just 17 seconds for British television as the censors felt it breached guidelines on animal cruelty. It was only broadcast in full for the first time in 2014. 5 Bakula ridiculous accents out of 5. Join the Discord for these insights into the jokes that people are making.
I apparently haven't been reading the Discord thing because I don't know what the hell he's talking about.
Norman Buchwald says, Berman and Braga closed the previous season by giving a finger to the new showrunners by suddenly introducing space Nazis. Kodo decides to return the favor by giving the finger to ending the long-forgotten Temporal Cold War. When I can comment more about the Killing Game from Voyager, you know something is wrong. A noble try, but sorry. 1 out of 5. Patrons hate it so far. Point extra G. Ha 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 ha. Alien Nazis. Ha 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 ha. Okay, this isn't terrible. It's actually enjoyable. Just don't think about it too much. A fun little romp with time travel chicanery. But let's see if things can get serious from here. William G. says, why? Why does Star Trek always go to World War II and the Nazis? I get that you wanted the holodeck character in Voyager to be based off a real Nazi, but do we need to have 2 episodes to explain it? I don't know if, as people suggested, this was all cooked up to resolve the Temporal Cold War, as it seems too convoluted, like someone came up with this as an alternate for Season 3, but was vetoed only to win a writer's game of poker to get the right 2 episodes for Seasons 4. 2 heel clicks out of 5.
It is kind of interesting that in 2004, well, I mean, I guess it's Star Trek in general, they always go to World War II. It makes sense because obviously that was like the last gigantic world event, obviously, like that pivoted the entire globe.
Yeah.
But they never go to
Also doesn't have politics attached to it, really. You know? It's not
Yeah,
Vietnam.
yeah. That's why I always wondered why people use World War II more than, say, World War I, because World War I is, just was so brutal and whatnot. It seems like there's a lot more fertile storytelling ground there. But it occurred to me a long time ago. I was like, oh, well, World War II has a bad guy. It's easy. It's pretty not literally, it's not explicitly black and white, but it's about as black and white as a war can be, really, is the good guys versus the Nazis, quote unquote good guys versus the Nazis.
It has a sort of characterization to things.
Yeah,
it's also World War I was just so primitive. It's like World War II is actually kind of effective at they've gotten better at the war technology and stuff like that. Grapple John Zorn says 2 episodes in 1 podcast. Cowards. Fine. I'm writing 10 sentences as soon as I can think of them. He never managed to think of them, I don't think. Eric McGowan says an awful episode that bafflingly wastes a ridiculous amount of time with stock World War II characters no one cares about. Overall, it's slightly forgivable only because Season 3's cliffhanger set this disaster up in the first place, and by the end of this, at least the Temporal Cold War is laid to rest. Matt Ross says, I played this game on my Xbox. It was called Wolfenstein New Order. Welcome to the generic backlot of Paramount, bland, dull, filled with cliche characters and Nazi references that are hackneyed and tired. Daniels really sucks as a temporal agent, and it's clear the writers had to end this indie arc and tie up all the other ridiculous plot lines of the Temporal Cold War as fast as possible, except who is the shadow guy of the Suliban from Episode 1? It is odd and yet also hilarious that the crew are not really broken up about their lost captain. T'Pol denying time travel just makes you want to scream, oh, shut up. Resolving the Temporal Cold War by resetting the timeline to make it right makes me ask, if there was no temporal shenanigans by the correction, does that mean that the entire series to this point is irrelevant, since starting with the Suliban, none of this should have ever happened? 1 make it stops out of 5. Final comment. Latte Librarian says, Gumby Silic is disturbing to watch. Sweet summer child Mayweather just realized the bad guys have time machines. Nothing like more time travel to fix your time travel problems. 2 destinies out of 5. Thanks, everybody, for leaving your thoughts about Stormfront. Overwhelming negativity, Clay, coming from the patrons. What are you going to give this one on our scale of 1 to 5?
I'm torn between a 2 and a 3.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's garbage, but it is the definition. Well, I guess it's technically not even a filler episode because they do wrap up a bunch of plot lines and stuff technically, but it's about as close as you can get to that while also wrapping up a plot line.
My problem is whether or not this functions weakly enough to be a 2, and if it's only a 2 because of the garbage it was put into it. You know what I mean? Like, does the episode itself work as well as it can, given what the fundamental problems are? In that case, I would give this a 3.
Yeah.
But if you include the previous problems, it kind of bumps it down to a 2 because the whole thing... Honestly, my rationale for bumping it down to be a 2 would just be like, this felt somewhat like a waste of time, even though, as you say, it does resolve plot lines at the same time. Like, fundamental core to the series' identity, it solves these problems.
Put a couple of huge quotes around resolve in that, I think. Even though they do resolve them, but it's just like, I don't know if it's technically a satisfying resolution, but
13 out of 13. I will never say Cold War temporal arc again for the remainder of the series. And so, in terms of what we're looking at, I guess,
I think I'm going to go with a 2 because it's 2 episodes. You've wasted the first 2 episodes of your shortened final season on this, and like. Could you have done this in 1? Probably. Is there really a huge reason to extend it? No. Does it really get you anything to extend it? No.
I would assume it's a budget constraint. They need more episodes with the same costumes and character and actors and stuff like that to make the cost worth it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm going to give it a 2, I think, because I think it takes up too much space, and it doesn't do that much with it.
I'll give it a 2 as well. I guess my overriding sense was that it was actually not as bad as I was expecting, based on what people were saying about it, and I think what the patrons are saying here. Kyle Barrett says it's one of the worst episodes of the series. I think there's way worse episodes of Enterprise. Yeah,
I think so.
I think its biggest sin is it's very boring, and it's 2 episodes. That was the real problem for me while I was watching. It was like, oh man, I got another one of these things to get through. Like, this is just too much of this Nazi Star Trek episode that I have to get through. So it's a little bit boring. It's too much. It fails because of what it is. And that, I guess I'll give it a 2 as well. That seems fair to me to give it a 2.
Yeah.
2 2s. So. World War 2? I guess it's thematically appropriate. So that's it. Thank you, patrons, for leaving your thoughts about the episode. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Patreon.com/ThePensky File if you want to support the show. I give it a 2. Clay gives it a 2. We'll be back with Home, which is the next episode. Enterprise gets home, as you saw at the end of this one. Anything you want to say, Clay?
Thank you for listening to Rotten Horror Picture Show. If you are, in fact, doing that, we've got American Werewolf in London is probably out at this point, and then after that, we'll be doing The Invitation, which I'm excited about, as it's the follow-up movie from the woman who directed Jennifer's Body, and is a fantastic movie, I think. So I'm excited
Invitation
about that.
is the Netflix movie, isn't it? Is that The Invitation?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember if it's in a Netflix original, but like that's where it lives. Seemingly in perpetuity on Netflix. Great movie.
Yeah, okay.
And trucking along on Badass, we're getting close to the end, actually. We've only got a few episodes left, I think, by this point. And, we're going into the New Line years on the Patreon coverage of Friday the 13th with Jason Goes to Hell the Final Friday.
Yep. You guys would have done your live stream by now, so it's out. If people want to hear Clay and Amanda's thoughts about the first 8 episodes in the final Friday the 13th.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't want to be a patron, but you want to hear their general thoughts.
Stuff. I always forget you can listen to that stuff afterwards. Yeah.
Yep. So if you guys want to hear what they have to say in general terms about the series, you can listen to that live stream, which will have happened on Friday the 13th. And I guess that's it. We're on with Home. This is a short Enterprise season, so we're going to be burning through these things. It's got two-parters, so that cuts down our episode counts. We've got only a limited number of episodes in the first place. People like the fourth season. We'll see how Home works out in that way. Home will be the first episode of the new season, basically. There's no... if Berman and Braga had not ended with Nazi imagery in season 3, Home would have been the episode we just watched, because it is right after they get back from the Xindi arc. There's no time travel shenanigans there.
Yeah.
So we're done.
I'll tell you, best season. People love it. I've heard that before, and it's never quite turned out that way.
We've heard that 4 seasons running on Enterprise. I think I can't think if there was another. DS9, people like DS9 season 6, but yeah, that's for another time. We were a little bit more down on season 6 because it has some really clunky stinkers in season 6 as well. But yeah, that's it. Enterprise season 4. I'm looking forward to more digital photography. So the passion that drives me is digital photography. Make sure you notice it the next time, Clay.
I can't wait till they really push the technology and get that Michael Mann Collateral look where everything's really digitally blown out because he's using half of a light to light an entire room.
They have some terrific star wipes coming up that they're really gonna blow your socks off. Thanks very much, everybody, for listening. Hope you enjoyed our coverage of Stormfront. Let us know what you thought about it down below, or you can email us, social media. Otherwise, we'll see you next time with Home. Bye.